Hello, welcome to my channel where I talk mostly about watercolour. I'm going to talk about this watercolour sketch I did today, and I was looking at some photos and some videos that I made of the Highlands in Scotland, and I just wanted to get an impression of these mountains. I'm not trying to do a realistic painting of the view, I'm just using some of the shapes and the colours and the lines to make an abstract interpretation of what I see. And I was really interested in using this really big brush that I bought to see what I could do. I wanted to make a real contrast between really thick lines and really thin lines. So I'm just getting straight into the painting here, and I'm using quite a limited colour palette. I've got indigo, Paynes grey, burnt sienna and some Phythalo turquoise. Now, I haven't used this brush before, and it was kind of fun to see what I could do with it. And what I really wanted to do is try and create these really sort of interesting looking lines. I mean, you could say, are they lines or are they shapes? I wanted to try and keep it as simple as I could. Okay, so once I had the shape down, I didn't do too much to it, and I did have to wait for it to dry, and I actually used my hairdryer. But now for the next shape. So for this colour I mixed together the burnt sienna and the indigo blue to get this more sort of neutral brown. Now I almost would have liked to have done this a bit quicker, but this is practice and I would actually like to do this painting again several times. I think the trick when you're doing such a simple painting is to really try and keep those lines looking quite interesting. I went in with a different brush this time, this really nice brush I bought that you can make the point very thin, or you can also use the body of the brush to make much thicker lines. Okay, so here I'm scoring in a line with my knife, and if you do that when the paint is wet, it will leave a dark line, a nice thin dark line. Okay, so I had to wait for this layer to dry as well. And then I mixed up more of the burnt sienna with the indigo blue, and I did a third line in the middle, and unfortunately I didn't hit the record when I did that, so it has skipped a bit. But what I also did was I dropped a bit of the pure burnt sienna into that. So you're getting a more neutral colour, but then you're also seeing some of the sort of stronger pigment there in places as well, and again that just adds a bit of interest to the painting. And actually what I'm doing here is I'm adding a layer of slightly more muted burnt sienna. So I've added a bit more blue because I felt like that burnt sienna was just too orange in colour really. So that's what I'm doing there. I'm just putting a thin layer of a more muted colour on top by adding the blue. So the thing that really struck me about this view was the water which kind of wrapped around the mountain, and I just wanted to do a really sort of abstracted impression of this water, and I actually decided to use the turquoise for this, even though the water wasn't turquoise. It was just something that I had a feeling I wanted to do, so I did it, and that's how I approached this painting. I was looking at the photos and remembering the mountains, but I wasn't trying to be literal, and I like this sort of line going between these two sort of bodies of water, because that made me think really of the rivers that connect with some of these lochs in Scotland. So again, this is a very abstracted interpretation of the view. Okay, so I'm dropping a bit of that Phythalo turquoise there onto that paint to give a bit of variation in tone, and I'm going to put the music up now while I finish off this painting, but as I go on, I get darker and darker layers, and that's just to give a good tonal variation. And also I'm concentrating on this contrast between these thicker lines and these thinner lines. But I'll put the music up and I'll jump in again at the end. Okay, so I'm just adding in some impression of clouds at the top there. But this sketchbook painting is basically finished, and I'm pretty happy with how it turned out. I think that the contrast between the blue and the burnt sienna is maybe a bit too much, so I did actually do another version of this where I didn't make that burnt sienna quite so strong. I didn't record the whole thing, but I've just put a clip of that in here at the end. So I really hope that you enjoyed this demonstration, and if you did, please hit like. I add a new watercolour video to my channel most weeks, so please consider subscribing to my channel if you would like to see similar videos in the future. Okay, thank you, bye.